guess we'll begin. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. As I'm concluding my series on marriage, today I wanted to talk about a topic, oneness in raising children. I'm going to consider this topic not about how to raise the children, but how to be one when we are raising children. And this tends to be more of a couple circumstance than raising a children circumstance, although we'll touch on, some tips on raising children or principles. But really it comes down to the unity between the husband and wife in their oneness and how this reflects in raising children. So topics to be covered. The importance of raising children and in marriage, or the importance of the oneness in raising children and in marriage. Achieving oneness in goals and agreements, but not necessarily in opinions. Achieving oneness in decisions for our children, and achieving oneness in disciplining our children. So what's the importance of oneness in raising children? As it says in the Gospel of Luke chapter 2, verse 48. So this is when Christ was about 12 years old, and he went to the temple, and he got lost into the temple, or to his parents, he got lost, and they stumbled upon him. When they found him, look at the verse of our beloved mother, when she says to him, "So when they saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said to him, 'Son, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have sought you anxiously.'" And I wanted to show the importance of oneness between the husband and the wife, the father and the mother, in front of the eyes of their children. Keep in mind, of course, as we know, Saint Joseph was not the biological father, but he was treated as a father, and he was honored by Saint Mary, even to Christ. And one of the things I have found of Saint Mary in this, I imagine, God forbid, we lose any of our kids and they go missing, and then we find them. And anxiously, probably like St. Mary, very anxious that our kids got lost. When we find them, we grab them and we say, "Look what you did to what? Me." Even if you want to say, "Look what you did to me and the spouse." We start with me. But St. Mary, she put, again, Joseph not being the biological father first, and then she put herself. And she put as not only it's her concern, but his father's concern for the Lord being missing. Many studies show children who grow up in a two-parent household have better outcomes. Better outcomes in what? In their behaviors, in their academics, in their financial success, in their emotional well-being, in future marriages, than children who grow up in a single-parent household. And keep in mind, a two-parent household doesn't necessarily, when they're referring to two-parent, like a united front between the two parents, not a broken home, because you could still be living as a husband and wife and be broken. Of course, this impacts the children also very negatively and can affect their behaviors, their academics, and their future on how it is. But a strong two-parent united front home, the kids have, again, this is the data, this is what the research show, and so we need to be mindful of this when we are raising our children in oneness. Another reason why this is important to be united front, not only for their future success, spiritual in this world, and mental and well-being. One of the reasons why it's important to be one, because children by nature can manipulate to get what they want. They're not born evil, okay? Our kids are not born evil, but they have a tendency to want something. And they can play off one parent against another parent. Or they can tell, like, for example, maybe your kid might come up to you and say, "Hey, Mom, I want this. I want to buy a new phone." And maybe in your mind, you want to maybe say yes. Sure, I don't have a problem with that, but let's check with Dad. Come, Dad? No. So, or I'll even take it simpler. Your kid wants a cookie. Ask one parent, the parent saying yes. Ask the other one, the other saying no. Now the kid figured out, if I want to get my way with this, I go to that parent. So one of the importance of oneness is so the kids don't manipulate us as parents. The third reason why it's very important to have oneness in raising children is the reinforcement of teachings. So for example, human psychology, and even as when we make decisions in general, we look at what we call a consensus. So if you're finding yourself asking for advice from someone or from many people, and you find like of the 10 people, 9 say do this, and 1 say the opposite. We by nature, that collective information more guides us into the decision making and more establishes or reaffirms what we need to do. So even though we may be one voice, when mom and dad are one voice in front of the kids, but in the brain of the kid, I have 2 equal opinion. Which, by the way, gets reinforced when when your kid's like, "I'm going to talk to Boone about this." Okay, come and talk to me. And I say exactly what you guys are going to say. So in the kid's mind, mom and dad say this, Abuna is saying this, my Sunday school servant is saying this, Tita and Giddu are saying this, blah, 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 saying this. So it reinforces in the kid's mind the choice that they need to make. The problem is, if you're saying one thing and your spouse is saying the other, they don't have a consensus. There's not a consensus in their mind. And so if it's not a clear decision, they're going to go on siding with what is going to actually make them feel good, even though that could be the wrong decision. So we want to it's important to have oneness, so there's the kids have reinforcement. The same thing. If I go from one church to another church and everyone is praying the same way and everyone's doing the rites in the same way, we have a consensus, this is how things are. But if every church decides to do their own thing, there's no consensus, and everyone's going to come make up their own stuff. So there has to be, again, number one, for the well-being of a child growing up, the oneness. The second is that because kids can manipulate to get what they want, and there need to be a united front with parent, so not to be manipulated. And number 3 is the reinforcement of the teaching, because again, it goes to their mind as a consensus. Oneness in raising children is an important reflection of the oneness of a couple's marriage. And I consider this topic more about couples than it is about raising children. Raising children is its own subject, but the oneness is a couple thing. Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. It's a very powerful force as spouses, as a community, as a church, When we are united, it holds a power. It holds, and it's beneficial to the home. It's beneficial to the church when we're united. It's beneficial, to us as a society when we are not. We call ourselves the United States of America. Should be united. But what happens when there's no oneness? There's division. So as Christ said, every kingdom, every city, and every house that's divided cannot stand. And so our marriages, when we're not having the oneness, and there's oneness in other topics like money and finance and so forth, but when we don't have the oneness, this has become an issue on the marriage. And it reflects, in the service, sometimes, you see cases where, because the husband and wife are not okay with each other, so they reflect or they project their differences or their frustrations within the kids. Oh, your mom says you can't have cookies? No, you can have a cookie. Oh, your dad said you can't go out and take the car? No, go here. Here's the key. That's not oneness. And somehow it becoming we're taking our issues on our kids. That's very dangerous. It's very harmful. Kids grow up not as strong spiritually, mentally, emotionally. This causes a lot of inner stress for children when we are not united. So typically, oneness in raising children is a reflection of the marriage. It's not about how to raise a kid. We can discuss this on like raising children. But being united is a couple issue. And it's a reflection of the marriage. If one spouse raises children without the input and agreement, oneness, of their spouse, this may lead to issues also in oneness of their marriage. In other words, typically, maybe one spouse is, very into parenting. And they tell the other one, the husband or the wife, back off. I got it. You don't know how to handle the kids right. Let me deal with it. I'm going to make the decisions. In the long term, even if your spouse lets you, it's going to cause a kind of a resentment in your other spouse in the long term. We want to be kind of united, and it's okay that maybe one of you might be more patient in a certain moment than the other spouse. That's okay. The point is your opinion was expressed and is being united together, and how you deliver the message, that's to be discussed. But to say, I'm not going to take my husband's opinion on this matter or my wife's opinion on this matter, this is not good. That's not oneness. The two become one flesh. And our children are the product of this oneness. So we don't raise our kids separately, we raise them in oneness. Achieving oneness in goals and agreements, but not necessarily in opinions. As it says in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 2 and 3. It says, bearing with one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. I know this is related to the church, but I want to take the spirit of this verse. Endeavoring to keep the unity. We should very intentionally, it doesn't happen naturally, but we should very intentionally and actively be united with our spouses when it comes to raising our children or any other topic. And that should be on the forefront when you're addressing children. When I'm addressing this issue or this question of my child, how am I keeping my husband, wife in the picture and on the same page? Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have the same opinion. So let me explain. Oneness does not equal that you're going to have the same opinion. And that's okay. But how to come to one answer and how to respond. So step to oneness, there is in goals and agreements for our children. The first is know that your spouse also has the best interests of your children in their mind. I'm going to take this in steps for a reason. If we go to the very last step, which is now we need to discuss opinions. If the only focus is on the difference of opinion, it can get heated. It can get like strong disagreement. And again, it's not about raising the children part. I'm talking about the unity part. But how we get to when we have a different opinion, it will along with the communication, along that we can come to a united front when it comes to raising our children. The first step is challenge, like Dr. Ayman said a few weeks ago, challenge your thinking. Don't think, oh, my husband or my wife, they don't know what they're doing, they got this wrong. I don't like what they're saying. Don't start with that. Start with the first thing in your mind. My husband, my wife also loves our kids and has the same best interest. I think I would like to say we're all going to agree to that. We all have our really good intention in our hearts towards our kids. Nobody has a bad intention. We all have good intention to our children. This is the first one. So if you want to get to the goal and agreement, start with putting principle. My husband, my wife has the same interest like I do for our children. Good, we're in agreement in that. We're united in that. The second is that both of us have the same goals and priorities. If I ask the dads here, and if I ask the moms here, what's your goals for your kids? What would you're all going to say the same thing. We want our kids to be spiritual inside the church. We want them, to have good behavior and do well in school and become successful in life. Every parent has those same goals. Your spouse has that same very goal. None of us say we want our kids to be failures. We want our kids, to be homeless. We want our kids to be away from the church. We want our kids not to care about school. No one has that. When you think about it, it's like, yeah, we all have the same interests. We all have the same goals. So that's the second thing, because that gets to the next layer. The very first principle, we all have the same interest. The second layer under that umbrella is that we all have the same goals. We're united. There's nothing to argue with this. Then, the third one. In agreements, even if opinions differ. This is the one that's probably we get challenged at. It's not the best interest, it's not the goals, it's the same. It's the opinion on how to achieve those goals. This is where the struggle may come. So it's the means or the ways to achieve the goal is where the opinions can be different. We're not necessarily united on that point. But how do we achieve oneness in the agreements, even if the opinions are not aligned the same? Number one, and this is common, we hear a lot, do not discuss opinions in front of your children. Even if you're going to come to an answer, generally speaking, when you do that in front of the kids, they pick up. They're so, like I said, one of the reasons why we want to be united in front of the kids is because they can manipulate. You know what? If you're discussing, well, I want to go have a sleepover at so-and-so's house. And one spouse is saying, yeah, I don't mind. No, I don't think this is a good idea. We shouldn't let them spouse. We didn't let the older one do it, and it's not fair. And they're hearing that different opinion. They're gonna eat up alive the other parent who's fighting. Dad is saying okay. Mom is saying okay. Why you have to say no? And it's you created a tension. And guess what? That reverts around to the spouse that is feeling like my opinion is being cornered. Now I'm frustrated, not only at my child for pushing against me, now I'm frustrated with my husband or wife that they put this situation in front of the kid. So number one, if you discuss the opinion in front away from the kids. Sarah and I have a rule. Some things, as I'll get to later, when it has to be a decision that has to be made by both of us. The typical answer for our children is they ask the question, you know what? Let me discuss this with mom, and mom and I will come up with an answer to you. They ask Sarah, let me discuss this with dad, and we'll come up to an answer with you. Just to show you how funny our kids are, of course, my kids, this generation is very brilliant. Okay, Dad, I know you have to ask Mom if I can buy this, but I just want your opinion. What do you think? Look what they're doing here. What do you think? If I say it's in my opinion at the moment, it might be different than Sarah's. And they'll figure that out. Because if I said yes, and Mom says no, and then we give a one answer no, it goes against Mom, or vice versa. So my answer usually to my kid when he asks that question, Habibi, my opinion is I need to ask your mom about this. I know, Dad, you can't make a decision without Mom, but what's your opinion? Habibi, my opinion is that I'm going to ask your mom, and then we'll tell you what our final say is. Because they're so smart. They are so smart. So, again, don't discuss the different opinions in front of them, but when you give an answer, and as you will see, you give a one-voice answer. Number two, after you discuss the opinion, you have to come to an agreement. You can't leave the situation hanging there because, some decisions have to be made, but you have to come to an agreement. This is the discussions we have to have again. But I'm going to go back to the first principle when I started the marriage series, that we are rooted in the love of God and the godly mindset and the godly way of dealing with things, which particular has to do with communication. Because sometimes the oneness is not necessarily that you don't come to an agreement, it's just that way you talk to each other, and that creates fight and tension. And guess what? Because we're fighting, we're not coming to an agreement, guess who's going to end up picking on this? Is the kids, and that affects them. Again, doesn't mean you have to agree, but in the spirit of love, we communicate. Knowing already that my husband, my spouse, has the same care for our children, and the same goals, and the same same priorities. After coming to an agreement, tell your children, like Saint Mary did when she met Christ, your father and I decided. Your mother and I decided. Even when I tell my kids, your mom and I decided this, it could be something I probably would have went a different route, but in front of the kids, your mother and I decided. This is a one voice. Even if your kids want to speak to you separately just to see where it was, you give that same united answer. Your father and I decided this. Your mother and I decided this. So he's getting that, like I was saying earlier, the consensus of thought. Well, mom and dad sharing the same opinion. They're coming to the same one answer. So in their mind, although you're one voice, they got two, in their minds, two opinions having the same answer. That's healthy for them. But don't tell your kids, you know what? Your mother said no. Your dad said no. Don't do that. Don't do that. Your mother and I, your father and I decided this. Even if you didn't agree to it, that's still the answer. This is the most healthiest, united front that you can have for your children. So, and achieving the oneness and decisions for our children. So practically, what steps can I take to get from we're on the same page, we have the same care, we have the same goals and priorities. How do I come to the same final answer? How do we go when the difference? So I will share some tips. As a husband and wife, you should have an agreed system, routine, and structure for your children, our children, in place. If you don't have a structure to fall on, and you're just doing it on the wing, you're going to find yourself getting into a lot of arguments. I would like to say there are 3 applications of decision making, where number 1, 100% decision making is on one parent fully making the decision without the input or anything from the other spouse. The second one, it's a 51-49%. And what I'm saying here, it's a decision making. Both parents discuss the option, but one parent will have the final say in the matter. The third one is the 50-50, where you're both equally have a say in this, and you must come to, the first one, the 100%, it seems obvious. You know what? My wife's got complete control of that. I'm not even going to bother with it. She makes the decision, done. We're united. There's no fighting. There's no arguments. The 51-49, you might put a precedent on one parent that might be, like, for example, I'll use myself and Sarah. Sarah is a dentist from Egypt. So when it comes to dental care, I'm not going to really have much to say. I'm going to trust Sarah to handle it. She's the expert. Sometimes when it comes to the medication, because I was a pharmacist, Sarah will lead me to see if to give him the med or not, or how much, or, that we use each other's expertise. And sometimes you should split certain things, in my experience. I remember one time, when we first had Justin, I was telling myself I wanted to really be an engaged father. I didn't want to be a hands-off dad. But in doing so, I find myself having a lot of opinion, a lot. And I remember, I don't know what it was, I guess we were at my parents' house, and Justin was like a toddler. And I kept telling Sarah, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, about my opinion. My mom kind of noticed that. So my mom pulled me aside and said, you know what? Some things are just left for the mom to decide. Back off. So, okay, Mom. I'm not saying your hands free. I'm saying decide which one you both see and agree upon that, you know what, when it comes to this, I'll let Mom handle it. When it comes to this, I'll let Dad handle it. And then, sometimes I would like to share in something, but you know what? I'll have Sarah have the final say. And Sarah will have some opinions that she sees as important for me to know as feedback, but she'll give me the final say. That's the 51-49%. Usually in the first 2, 100%, 51-49, you don't have a lot of argument because someone has a final say. The problem is when it's 50-50. But what I'm trying to say is by doing the first 2, you will minimize everything has to be shared and discussed and opinionated about. 50% decision makings I think are things like, for example, do you let the kids sleep over someone's house or not? I think that should be a 50%. That's not just a mom decision by herself or a dad decision. You both have to have an input, because if one parent is against this, especially something like this, I might have an opinion about sleepovers. That's another topic. But I'm just saying, for the sake of oneness, some things have to be 50-50. The kids' school, I think this needs to be a 50-50. There has to be discussions about this. Maybe one parent will have the hand in monitoring and applying in this, and the other parent responsible for that, whatever it is. But there's certain things that fall on 50-50 that you agreed on. You need to have this discussion. This is the one that can have the most, because if the opinions are different, well, what do we do? What steps can we take? The first one, again, do not discuss in front of your children. That's a mistake to do that. The second is you have to come to an agreement by discussion. Until you come to, until you come to a point. And then when you come to the point, you go to your kids, and it's your father and I, your mother and I decided kaza. I know sometimes the opinion might not be the same, and you both might have valid points. I'll give you the most typical one that I tend to hear a lot. Let's say you have a kid that's not really studying well and not doing in school. As an example, this typically happens. And the kid is getting a bad grade. You might have one parent that says, you know what? Let it be. Because when he or she gets a bad grade, they're going to feel sorry for themselves. And maybe and lose out on rewards because of what they did. You might have the other parent saying, no, if we're not on top of the kid, they're going to be negligent in their studies. And both might actually have valid points, but it has to be discussed. You have to bring it out, and there's no one right answer with this one because it depends on the uniqueness of a child. It depends on the uniqueness of child. But, one of the things to bring up in discussions, in my opinion, that helps is facts, is data. What is like if you cannot come to a consensus, then go to what's data proven, most effective. You can use that as a reference point. You know what? It shows that if you leave the kid alone and let them figure it out, they actually, even if they made the mistake and do bad on the test, they'll work harder the next time. If the data says the opposite, okay, use that. What is the data showing? What is your experiences with your child as they were getting older? That you have to be on top of them, or do you have to let them make mistakes? But once you come to an agreement, you know what? Your father and I, your mother and I. That's how to answer it. Oneness, achieving oneness. So this is on, like, when it comes to opinion and raising kids. Or again, I'm not talking about the actual raising kid. Like, do you let kids sleep over, or what's the best method? We're going to have that in the Vineyard meeting. I'm just talking about unity in coming together, because this is more of a couple issue than it is about raising children issue. But again, also, how do we achieve that same oneness when we discipline our kids? Sometimes you have a parent that might think, you know what, the kid's going to have it. It's going to get major consequences, blah, blah, blah. You might have another parent like, you know what, this is one of those things to let go. What do we do? The same principle as the previous slide. But I'll give you the verse, correct your son, and he will give you rest. Yes, he will give the light to your soul. This is Proverbs 29. So we do need to discipline our kids. But how to? This is how, to come, you should, again, have an agreed system in place. Like, discuss beforehand. What each of you see as fitting as a way of discipline. Part of it's going to come the way you were raised. The way our parents raised us, we try to apply what we learned from them. A lot of it may come from the books we read or the sermons we listen to, so we come to an understanding of how to, but how do we actually apply? You have to have an agreed system. If the kid does a certain thing, he or she will lose a privilege. If the kid, hits somebody, it's going to be a different consequence. If this, if they lie, it's this consequence. If they this, come to an agreed system. And how? The exact same thing. Well, actually, one of the things not to do is do not correct your spouse in front of your kids or interfere when they are disciplining. Actually, this was an advice that Sarah and I heard. Even if, I'm going to say something, even if your husband or wife is disciplining in a way that, let's just, for argument's sake, just go with me, it's wrong. Don't correct it in front of the kids. Because you're not showing union with your spouse. Believe it or not, this is important. Maybe you don't like what your husband or your wife did. That can be discussed away from the kids. But in front of the kids, if your kid is looking at you like, Dad's losing it, Mom's crazy, they're expecting a reaction from the other spouse to defend them. Again, remember, one of the things kids do is the manipulation. If dad's starting to discipline and run to mom and mom hugs him, oh, habibi, you know what? The kid manipulated you. You can say, habibi, I understand you don't like it when dad yells at you, or you don't like it when he's going to take your toy away from you or whatever. But you know why Bubba's upset? Do you know why Mom is upset? You're showing unity to your spouse that way. Any concerns of the disciplines or action taken should be discussed in private between a couple and not in front of the kids. So maybe let's say I was harsh with my boy. You know what? Sarah will come to me and says, Buna, I know the kid did wrong. And you're right that he needs a consequence, but to say you're going to take the Xbox away for the next 6 months, I think this is harsh. And we can discuss it. And if I'm insisting, or let's vice versa, if Sarah's insisting on the consequence, don't undo it. Don't undo it. It may be the wrong consequence, but don't undo it because it has to do with the unity of the husband and wife. But maybe when Sarah explains things to me, or I explain things to Sarah, and then I come to my mind, think, you know what? I think I reacted in anger. And maybe what I said was harsh. Sarah's not going to go and say, you know what? You can have you're just going to lose the Xbox today, but if you behave good the rest of the weekend, you'll get it tomorrow, or get it by Monday. No. I need to go back and say that. Maybe I can say, you know what? I thought about it, and if I will let you have the Xbox by Monday, if you behave well this weekend. Because if Sarah went, it looks like, again, we're not unified. It looks like mom changed dad, or if it was vice versa, dad changed mom. But again, that discussion, you can, and you have the right to tell your husband or wife, I don't necessarily agree with how you handled it. And this is my concern. But at the end, you took an action, and I'll support you at the end of the day. And you know what? Sometimes when I hear this, I'll go back and I'll undo what I did. But it looks like to the kid, I came to that conclusion. But mom always supported me. And when mom does that, I'm always supporting her. Like I said, do not reverse the consequence of your spouse. Any reversal should come from the parent who implemented the consequence to begin with. You know, matter of fact, when your kids are showing frustration, you can tell them, Habibi, and you can validate how they feel. You know, Habibi, I know you're upset, but you did something that upset mom, that upset dad. And I agree with dad on this one, I agree with mom on this one, that what you did was wrong. And I think you need to apologize. You know what? In the long term, this is helpful. And then at the end, guess what? Your kids, long term, emotional status, feeling that mom and dad are on the same page, is healthy for their psychology. It's healthy for their psychology. The exact same, so in both, applying you have to have a system in place, and you have to be unified. And just like our beloved mother, St. Mary, did to Christ, she told Christ, your Father and I were worried about you. So I hope, again, this is more of a couple thing, and I'm going to conclude, and this is the end of the talk. If anybody has any questions or comments, feel free. Okay, I think we have 15 minutes, before the kids finish up their. In my experience in the priesthood, believe it or not, the thing that upset the kids the most, at least from what I hear from them when I sit with them, when they feel mom and dad are not united. This tends to affect them. When the parents are united, even if the parents are kind of like strong, but at the end, the kids long term have this feeling that mom and dad love each other, and that makes them feel more secure. Again, this doesn't mean we're going to agree on everything point by point, but we have the spirit of love, the spirit of good communication, and if we have a good system in place, you're going to find yourself at a minimum disagreement. At a minimum, not 100%. But even when you have a disagreement, make sure your end goal is to be one. That's more important. That is so important. I can't express this. Not only it's good for your kids, it's actually good for your marriage. It's good for your marriage too when we are united like this. And again, this goes back to even what I mentioned back in boundaries in marriage. One of the behaviors is putting your children before your spouse. That's a boundary issue. And studies after studies after studies show that if you put your children before your spouse, this is going to have a negative impact in the long term of the marriage, because then the spouse feels, my priority got kicked out. I no longer count. My kids is coming before me. I'm not saying kids are not important, and we said they are priority, but God first, then your spouse, then your children. And you're doing your children a favor when you put your spouse first. Maybe you don't like the discipline of your spouse? Okay, talk to them privately. Say, I have a concern about this. I understand what they did was wrong, but maybe there's a better approach. And you can come to a conclusion. Again, what's helping is that really, honestly, I think everyone here, again, has the same interest for their kids. We care about our kids. There's no parent that doesn't care about their kid. There's no parent that doesn't have the same goals. We want our kids to be successful, healthy, in the church, going to heaven. We all have that. I don't think there's any parent that doesn't have this. So knowing that fact makes it easier when you communicate the different opinion. Because I know, at least when I talk to my husband or wife, we're on the same page. We're just, the way of getting that same goal achieved, maybe is where we're different. And that helps us. I'll leave if there's still any questions. I guess we'll just wait. We have 12 minutes left. If anybody has any questions about any of the previous talks I had from the marriage series, you're more than welcome to. She'll tell you a story about having unity with your spouse. If Sarah doesn't mind, it's a nice story. When I think Justin was about 4 or 5 years old. Maybe he heard me say the story before, but when Justin was about 4 or 5, he did something wrong. And of course, Sarah was very upset with what he did, and she was disciplining him. And I'll be honest, in my mind, I perceived that discipline was kind of harsh. And at one point I said, Sarah, enough. He did wrong, but enough. Think you're hard. And then Justin went in his room very upset, and he slammed the door. Not in my mind, he's upset because how mom disciplined him. So I went in the room to go check on him. And when I sat next to him in bed, I'm like, hey, Justin, how are you? And I'm not, funny thing is, I'm not mad at him. I was just trying to check on how he is. So when I asked him, how are you, Justin? All of a sudden, he started to yell at me. He goes, get out. Habibi, I just want to check on you. Get out. Of course, my blood started to boil at this point, and I'm thinking, look what you look what you did. Even the kid doesn't want to talk to me. So I think I hit Sarah's guilt so much. So of course, Sarah went inside the room to check on Justin. So when she went to sit next to him, and Sarah started like, Justin, I'm really sorry I yelled at you like that. And the kid started to break down. He said, Mom, I'm not mad at you because you yelled at me. I know why you yelled at me. I did this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm mad because Dad yelled at you. And I was like, I was here to save you. But that was a big lesson for me. Ever since that moment, I learned not to do that again. As much as I was defending him, he was more upset that I was yelling at his mom. That's why the union of the husband and wife is so important. Because when you don't have this union in front of your kids, they get broken. They get affected. And sometimes I remember one time a kid came to me in confession, Abuna, I have these nightmares. Habibi, what's going on? He's like, Abuna, I'm always having the nightmare that the police are going to come to the house and take away Daddy. Habibi, why are you saying that? You have a really nice dad, and he's so wonderful, and, serving in the church and doing so many nice things. Why you? And he said, Abuna, every day my parents fight, and mom was like, I'm going to call the cops. I'm going to call the cops. I'm going to call the cops. And it's not like it's a violent situation. It's just that they're very expressive in the way they talk to each other. But guess what? Your kid heard that. And he's having nightmares that Dad's going to go to jail because he fights with Mom. So we really need to be careful. that in front of our kids, that we show unity, that we show that mom and dad are okay, that we show that we love one another, and that mom and dad are on the same page, just like Saint Mary did with Saint Joseph. When they approached Christ, your father and I were looking for you. We were both worried about you. It's not one-sided. We're one team. But please be careful. Again, I'm just sharing with you some of the stuff, either I've from my own personal learning and experiences, from what I see in the khidmah. That's why oneness has to do with a couple. It's not parenting. Parenting is another topic. Oneness is a couple thing. And so this is one of the things, to be one opinion, one agreement, one voice for the kids, one heart in front of the kids, one way of a united front in disciplining, oneness. May God give us the wisdom, the patience, the love, the guidance, and we pray for our children. We'll do so much, and God will take care of the rest, but we have to do our part. That's what's called from us. So my advice, I pray that the topics that I covered on marriage is something we apply day in, day out. Just don't let it be an information, but apply it. You will see a big difference in your home. You will see a big difference in outcomes in your children. You will have, you're not going to have no struggles. There'll be struggles, but you're moving in a very good direction, and everyone will benefit from this. And glory be to our God. Amen. I think we'll just start setting up for the screens and stuff.